myself. Who in this room has lived through an internet shutdown? Yay, great. Over there. Where are you guys from? Cameroon. And yourself? Cameroon. Oh, okay, great. So I don't think I need to define what shutdowns are because we've had a lot of people talk about shutdowns today. But one thing that I want to really recognize here in this room as well is during the 2016 election in Ghana, there were rumors that the internet was going to be shut down. There were statements being made by the police chief and other folks saying that fake news, hate speech, disinformation is a threat to our democracy and that we were going to shut it. But as Ghanaians do, they got this one right as well. They managed to hold a free and fair election without really shutting down the internet. That means a lot. For me, my personal experience of shutdown, if you would ask me how many times Ethiopia, my home country, has shut down the internet, I honestly won't be able to tell you how many times that would be, because it just happens way too many often times that I've literally stopped counting. There have been so many times where I had to travel to Kenya or other countries just to be able to work. I work remotely. And maybe it's also because of this that I've started, I work with Access Now. I lead the Keep It On campaign, which is a campaign that fights against internet shutdowns. And the reason why I started doing that was because of the personal experiences of what happened to me. I define myself as a researcher, as an activist that works in the space and tech, social justice, and really trying to define what tech, how responsible ethical tech can be applied in the different communities that we live in, right? So for me as an Ethiopian, I've experienced too many shutdowns, but the one that was very personal to me was the one we had in 2016, and it was in October. Before 2016 October, we had, Ethiopia was going through a lot of turmoil, a lot of people had died. We've lived through a dictatorship for 27 years, and I tell you, during those 27 years, many, many things have gone wrong. And one of the things that, people were losing their jobs, farmers were being pushed away from the lands that they've owned for generations, and so many things had gone wrong. By December 2015, people were out on the streets being shot, still protesting. And it was insane. Like you're literally seeing people being shot on the streets, and there's another more wave of people moving to the streets to be shot. That's how people didn't care. They had nothing to lose, and that was the tipping point that we all had reached as a country. So October 2016, there's a religious holiday, and this protest is happening within the Oromo community, which is one of the biggest ethnic community in Ethiopia. And what was really fascinating and really depressing was that on that religious festival, if you're at that religious festival, it meant that you are part of the festival, but then you're also there to protest and to show the government that this can't happen. It's going to be 30 years living under the same party system. So before that, the government had gone around and closed all of the printing presses. They literally walked from one to another, and closed all of the printing presses. So we only had one printing press that would read. You as an editor would bring your newspaper to be printed, and they would read in advance the content and say, okay, this one can go, but that one, no, not today. To an extent where when we woke up in 2016, we didn't have any newspaper. I remember growing up in a household where my mom and dad read a lot, and they used to have a lot of newspapers in the house. By 2016, 2015, you can't go outside and buy one newspaper that would have really credible information. So when we got to October 2016, and for a lot of us, again, that was the tipping point. What happened was that millions of people went for that religious festival, but it was also a sign of protest for a lot of people. And the crowd was literally telling the government, and fair enough, to go to hell, and that they should go to so many other not very nice places. So during that time, the military that is supposed to be there to protect people decided to they didn't shoot the people there, but they decided to fire shots so that the people could disperse. And of course, as many of you can imagine, if you had 1 million people in a very disorganized place, there's going to be a stampede, and that's exactly what happened. So many people died that day for no reason. And you would imagine, the internet was already blocked then, but at least the mobile networks were working. You would imagine, if you had the same government, what they would be doing, for instance, would be they would turn on the network so that people can find each other. that was on a weekend, so that the health service providers can come, like, because they're on shift, right? So those health service providers can come and provide that really essential services to the hundreds that are injured on that day. That's not what they did. What my government then did was they decided to block the whole network. Everything went offline. And I remember being home. We know one of my cousins was going to that festival. And I remember my dad frantically calling, trying to find whether my cousin, his nephew, if he was alive. And luckily he left for a few minutes before things exploded. And he survived, but we only found out a day after that he was still alive. My sister, her very good friend is a journalist, is a photographer, and was there. She had begged him not to go the day before. He survived the stampede because he was able to climb on a tree. Barely survived, but she was only able to find him after a day, that he was okay. And that's just one of many, many more stories. I know a mother that looked for her son for 3 days in that same city. She was only able to find him after 3 days, but her tragedy was going to one hospital to another hospital trying to find his body because she was sure that he was dead. And so the question that I maybe want to ask you and want you to really think about is when the internet is shut down, yes, we lose money. But for me, the very important thing was that the internet is not shut down on a normal Tuesday. Since a normal Tuesday, there's a problem with the network, maybe someone cut the submarine cables. But it doesn't happen on a Tuesday. For me and a lot of the other Cameroonians, Rwandese and others, Congolese, Rwanda hasn't shut down the internet yet. So for a lot of us, what happens is that on that day specifically, maybe you're going out to protest, or even worse, you're organizing to protest. Or maybe on that day you're going out to elect. Or maybe on that day you're demanding some basic rights that you feel you deserve, So, and this is not just a story from Ethiopia. We know the story that Rebecca told us in Cameroon. But maybe what we didn't hear from Cameroon was that when the internet was shut down on the Anglophone or English-speaking side of the country, there were a lot of people that died. We all remember what the stories that came out when the internet was turned on the Anglophone side of Cameroon. But specifically, we've seen pictures of a mother and a kid walking in an arid area, being shot by the military, the Cameroonian military, and it's only after like 3 months that picture and video was finally uploaded. But that's exactly what happens when governments shut down the internet. And this is not a story for people to feel sad. No. And to be very honest with you, when the internet was shut down, I didn't fold my hands and wait for it to come back. No, that's not what we did. We organized in many different ways and really tapping into our informal and offline networks to document what was happening. So for me, the most important thing then in Ethiopia was to really count the number of dead bodies. Because the people that died had names, they have families, and it's a body. It's not like you can't just, we estimate, until today we don't know how many people had died during that whole thing. But the biggest discussion on TV for the government was that it's only 57 people. As if 57 is, it's literally 57 individuals that we're talking about. So what we did was that, and what we really depended on, and was really essential for us, was that the diaspora was immensely important. And the same thing for the Cameroonian case, the same thing in DRC, is that the diaspora was our connection to tell the world what was happening to us. And of course foreign journalists and media is not allowed. So we had transatlantic connections and satellite TVs, 2 important satellite TVs that were reporting back to us what was happening 40 kilometers away from where I live. There was a day where I didn't know the protest had gotten almost close to our house. It's only when I turned on the TV, because you can't call anybody. You can't use the internet. There's no hashtags that you can use. It was only my brothers and sisters that lived abroad that would tell me, oh yeah, it's almost about to get to your house. But people have, we've used many offline networks to organize, and similar in Democratic Republic of Congo, in Bukavu, there's going to be an election in a few weeks. It's going to be a tense one. We know what our brothers from DRC have been experiencing for the past many years, and they've already built mesh networks and community networks so that that connection is there. Because when the internet goes off, people are raped, people are killed, people are kidnapped, and of course your property is looted. That's what happens. So what people have done in India and Pakistan and so many other places, that they've created alternatives. So now there's an election happening in DRC. We're already organizing with civil society organizations there. And one of the things that we're doing is that people are downloading VPNs. That's really essential. You can't download VPNs after it goes off. Everybody knows that now. We've learned the hard way. I get really stressed if I haven't updated my VPN. That's how VPNs have really significantly changed my life. People are downloading apps like Uni, trying to see if websites are being blocked and if they can actually get technical evidence of stuff being blocked. So that is super important as well. There's an election coming up in Senegal, and Senegal is going to be going through some really tricky times. They've just passed a legislation in parliament that would allow the government to do a lot of things within the telecom infrastructure. Civil society organizations are already meeting up, trying to figure out how they're going to watch the election and how they're going to be monitoring the network. Because monitoring the network is really essential. You can't go like, I don't know, maybe they shut it down, maybe it's just the network. We want exact evidence. Because in Cameroon and other places, what we've done is we've taken telecoms and governments to court. Even though the courts, we know that they're not going to be fair and free and they're not going to decide on our behalf, but at least there's that challenge of saying that our freedom to speak and our freedom to access the internet and really critical information, especially when that critical information is about to save your life, that's what, there's no way that you can joke with that. So my call to you maybe is not really to, people have organized, and in many ways we will overcome this. But what is really scary and a threat to many of us in this continent right now is the amount of control government has over the information we share and what is allowed to be shared and when it's allowed to be shared. And what would be really scary is that if anyone from here is from Uganda, as we know, they have this ridiculous social media tax, for instance. And many Ugandans and many of my friends are not paying that tax. They'd rather spend their money downloading VPNs and wasting time on VPNs rather than pay that ridiculous price to speak. And that we've seen noticed that's going to be a trend. In Tanzania, we have this thing where bloggers are supposed to pay tax, $900. Which blogger do you know has $900? It's ridiculous. But these are the new ways that governments have really started to control the information that we're able to share. So it has become a norm, unfortunately. Every time, like we always say, every time the prime minister or one of the ministers sneezes in Ethiopia, they need to close the internet. That's literally how many times it's become such a norm. It's not that we don't care, it's just that we've become so used to it that it's not even, would not it's the first time and the 15th time is not the same. So my call to you and to all of you and some of the people that I see in this room is that we've created a movement. We've created a movement that has involved a lot of people. The way that I relate with someone that has lived through an internet shutdown is really unique for me. Because I feel like we've gone through something, and that really traumatic experience of not knowing what's going to happen, and the fact that you have nowhere to go and you're not able or allowed to share information is really something unique that not a lot of people get to go through, and it's not a fun thing. But my call to you is we've created this movement called #KeepItOn. The other day I got a message, and it's a coalition that we've built. It's 175 organizations that work in very diverse sectors that have come together to say, hell no, you're not allowed to shut down the internet, and if you do, we won't just hold our hands and watch you and let you turn it on, So the other day, someone tweeted at me saying, #KeepItOn, our internet has been shut down for 2 weeks, there's been protests, and then in this this region that I've never heard of, very close to the border with Chechnya and Russia. And I'm like, oh, okay, so let's dig this in, right? So I Googled, I couldn't find anything in English, and I have a colleague that speaks Russian, and I was like, hey, there's this thing that I've heard, can you check? And it was actually true. There's been 2 weeks of protests. The internet had been shut down for 2 weeks. The whole network was off, and a lot of people have been killed. So there was something there. It was just that the foreign media or the Western media wasn't covering this. So we were able to document that. But shout out to that guy that, apparently he crossed a border just to be able to tweet and tell the world that this is happening to us. So my ask for you guys, and what I'm trying to say here today again and again, is that, you know, the internet is not shut down on a normal Tuesday where you and I are sitting and having coffee, you know, pontificating about the world and how horrible tech companies are. No. Unfortunately, that's not when it happens. It happens when you need to speak the most. It happens when you need to organize to protest. It happens when you're actually on the streets. And it really does happen when you're looking for your son's body at every hospital that you can find because you're not allowed to speak. So my call for all of you is to really join this movement, because it is a movement that has over 175 organizations that work in very diverse spaces. And all we talk about and all we want to do is to really keep the internet on for all reasons. Yeah. Thank you. Sure, questions?
I would like to ask what the best recommendation you would give to countries like mine where the internet is on but the government is consistently making it expensive for you to access. So they're imposing social media taxes on voice over internet calls, so it becomes more expensive to be online. So most people would just rather go and buy bread as opposed to being online because it's become expensive.
Are you from Uganda? Zambia? Oh yeah, that's actually a really interesting case because no one is really talking about what's happening in Zambia. So one of the ways that governments have figured out, because you know when they choke the whole internet, they realize they lose so much money and it doesn't look nice. You know, you become that government that doesn't, tourists can't access the internet is the biggest conversation that you hear out there. But one of the means that, you know, as you rightfully explain here, is that it's also making it expensive. So our taxes, for me, it's more that our tactics have to change, and I think we really need to invest on community networks, because at the end of the day, telecom companies are there to make their money and to provide that service, but only if it makes sense to them. So for me, I would say invest in community networks. Let's learn about how we can create our own mesh network and how we can sustain it so that we are able to have access to information when we need it, what we want it, and at a very affordable price. Yeah.